Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister, sees the Middle East as a giant chessboard. His moves are calculated, strategic, and often ruthless. Netanyahu's grand strategy, as analysts observe, involves weakening or dismantling nations that he perceives as threats to Israel. These threats, in Netanyahu's view, are not merely states themselves, but rather the militant groups they harbor: Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. To counter these groups, Netanyahu has adopted a strategy of indirect confrontation. He aims to destabilize the very countries that provide these groups with support and sanctuary. Netanyahu's list of targets is extensive. It includes Sudan, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Somalia, Iran, and Yemen. More recently, Lebanon has been added to this roster of nations in Netanyahu's crosshairs. These countries, diverse in their politics, religions, and cultures, are nonetheless united by one factor: they are all Arab or Persian states located in Israel's neighborhood. Netanyahu's critics argue that his strategy is dangerously short-sighted. They contend that sowing chaos in these nations will only create more problems for Israel in the long run. Furthermore, they question the morality of a policy that seeks to destabilize entire countries with little regard for the human cost. Netanyahu, however, remains undeterred. He views his strategy as a necessary evil, a pragmatic approach to ensuring Israel's security in a volatile region. He believes that by weakening these states, he can cripple Hamas and Hezbollah, depriving them of the resources and safe havens they need to threaten Israel. Netanyahu's supporters applaud his tough stance, hailing him as a strong leader who understands the realities of the Middle East. They argue that in a region rife with enemies, Israel must take decisive action to protect its interests. The debate over Netanyahu's strategy is not merely academic. It has real-world consequences, shaping the lives of millions of people across the Middle East. As Netanyahu makes his moves on the regional chessboard, the world watches with bated breath, uncertain of what the endgame will bring. Netanyahu's strategy has already had a profound impact on the Middle East. The countries he has targeted are mired in turmoil, their governments weakened, their societies fractured. Libya, once ruled by the iron fist of Muammar Gaddafi, is now a failed state. Rival militias, fueled by tribalism and greed, battle for control of the country's oil wealth. The rule of law has collapsed and chaos reigns. In Iraq, the ghosts of the US-led invasion still haunt the land. The toppling of Saddam Hussein created a power vacuum that was quickly filled by sectarian violence. Sunni and Shia militias clashed, turning the country into a bloodbath. The rise of ISIS, a brutal terrorist organization, further exacerbated the chaos, plunging Iraq into a new abyss of violence. Syria, once a beacon of stability in the region, has been ravaged by a brutal civil war. President Bashar al-Assad's brutal crackdown on protesters ignited a conflict that has drawn in regional and international powers. Millions have been displaced and hundreds of thousands killed. The country lies in ruins, a testament to the horrors of war. Yemen, the poorest country in the Arab world, is now home to the world's worst humanitarian crisis. A Saudi-led coalition, backed by the United States, launched a bombing campaign in 2015. Aiming to dislodge Houthi rebels who had seized control of the capital. The war has created a humanitarian catastrophe, with millions facing starvation and disease. Somalia, still recovering from decades of civil war, remains a fragile state. The government, backed by international forces, is struggling to assert control over the country, battling both al-Shabaab militants and powerful clan-based militias. Sudan, once a regional power, has been plagued by conflict and instability. The secession of South Sudan in 2011 led to a loss of oil revenue, plunging the country into economic crisis. The Darfur genocide, a campaign of ethnic cleansing by government-backed militias, further stained Sudan's reputation. Netanyahu's role in the lead-up to the 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq is a subject of intense debate. Critics accuse him of deliberately misleading the Bush administration about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction (WMD) program, knowing that such claims would resonate with the post-9/11 American psyche. They point to Netanyahu's own words, delivered in a speech to the US Congress in 2002, in which he warned of the dangers posed by Saddam Hussein's alleged WMD program. Netanyahu's defenders argue that he genuinely believed that Iraq posed a threat to Israel. They point to the fact that Saddam Hussein had used chemical weapons against his own people and had fired Scud missiles at Israel during the First Gulf War. They argue that Netanyahu was simply trying to protect his country from a dangerous enemy. The truth, as is often the case, is probably more nuanced. Netanyahu, a shrewd politician, undoubtedly understood the power of fear and how it could be used to advance Israel's interests. He also knew that the Bush administration was eager to confront Saddam Hussein, who was seen as a state sponsor of terrorism. By playing up the threat posed by Iraq, Netanyahu was able to nudge the United States towards war, a war that ultimately served Israel's interests by removing a powerful enemy from the region. The fact that no WMDs were ever found in Iraq only served to further fuel the controversy surrounding Netanyahu's role in the war. Iran, the Islamic Republic, stands as the ultimate prize in Netanyahu's strategic chess game. He views Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat to Israel and has repeatedly called for military action to prevent Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Netanyahu's efforts to persuade the international community to take a hard line against Iran have been relentless. He has cultivated close ties with world leaders, delivering fiery speeches at the United Nations General Assembly and other international forums, warning of the dangers posed by Iran. Netanyahu's efforts have yielded mixed results. The Obama administration, much to Netanyahu's chagrin, signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, in 2015. The deal, negotiated by the P5+1, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States, plus Germany, and the European Union, imposed strict limits on Iran's nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. Netanyahu vehemently opposed the deal, arguing that it did not go far enough in curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions and that it would only embolden the Islamic Republic. He found a more receptive audience in President Donald Trump, who shared his distrust of Iran and his disdain for the JCPOA. Trump withdrew the United States from the deal in 2018, reimposing sanctions on Iran and raising tensions in the region. However, despite Netanyahu's efforts, Trump did not take military action against Iran. The Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, while crippling Iran's economy, did not succeed in bringing the Islamic Republic to its knees. Section 5. A House Divided, Rebuilding Gaza and the Palestinian Question. The Gaza Strip, a densely populated coastal enclave controlled by Hamas, presents a unique challenge for Netanyahu. Israel withdrew its settlers and troops from Gaza in 2005, but continues to control the territory's borders, airspace, and territorial waters. This blockade, coupled with repeated Israeli military incursions, has turned Gaza into an open-air prison for its 2 million Palestinian inhabitants. Netanyahu has come under increasing pressure to find a solution to the Gaza problem. The humanitarian situation in the Strip is dire, with widespread poverty, unemployment, and a lack of basic services. The international community has condemned Israel's blockade of Gaza, calling for an end to the collective punishment of Palestinian civilians. Netanyahu has attempted to thread the needle on Gaza, balancing his desire to maintain security for Israel with the need to address the humanitarian crisis in the Strip. He has allowed some goods to enter Gaza and has even engaged in indirect negotiations with Hamas, mediated by Egypt. However, Netanyahu has resisted calls to lift the blockade entirely or to engage in direct negotiations with Hamas, which Israel considers a terrorist organization. The Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank, has accused Hamas of being a stumbling block to peace, further complicating the situation. Section 6. The Uncertain Truce, Hamas, Hostages and the Fragile Peace. The current ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, brokered in January 2025 after 15 months of conflict, hangs by a thread. The agreement, mediated by the United States, Qatar and Egypt, involved the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas in exchange for the freeing of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. While the ceasefire has brought a welcome respite from violence, it remains fragile. The issue of hostages remains a major sticking point. Hamas is still holding a number of Israeli civilians and the bodies of 2 Israeli soldiers, while Israel continues to hold thousands of Palestinian prisoners. The families of the hostages, both Israeli and Palestinian, have been vocal in their demands for their loved ones' release, adding to the pressure on both sides to reach a deal. The ceasefire agreement also includes provisions for the reconstruction of Gaza, which was devastated by Israeli airstrikes during this conflict. However, the details of the reconstruction effort remain vague, and it is unclear how the funds will be channeled and who will oversee the process. The issue of reconstruction is further complicated by the fact that Hamas remains in control of Gaza. Section 7. The Saudi Gambit Normalization and the Price of Peace. Netanyahu has made no secret of his desire to forge closer ties with the Arab world, particularly with Saudi Arabia. He sees such a rapprochement as essential to isolating Iran and bolstering Israel's standing in the region. Netanyahu has been encouraged by the Trump administration's efforts to broker normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states, such as the Abraham Accords signed with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. However, Saudi Arabia, the custodian of Islam's holiest sites, has been reluctant to normalize relations with Israel without a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Saudi leadership has come under increasing pressure from the United States to make peace with Israel, particularly in light of the growing threat from Iran. However, the Saudis are wary of alienating their own population, many of whom sympathize with the Palestinian cause. Normalization with Saudi Arabia would be a major coup for Netanyahu, cementing Israel's acceptance in the region and potentially paving the way for similar agreements with other Arab states. However, such a deal would likely come at a price. The Saudis are expected to demand significant concessions from Israel on the Palestinian issue, such as a freeze on settlement construction in the West Bank and a commitment to a two-state solution. Section 8. The American Enigma. Trump's unpredictable Middle East playbook. The Trump administration's approach to the Middle East has been characterized by unpredictability and a disdain for traditional diplomacy. Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, move the US embassy to Jerusalem, and recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights have all been met with mixed reactions in the region. While Netanyahu has welcomed Trump's unwavering support for Israel, some analysts have argued that Trump's actions have actually made the region more unstable. Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, for instance, has been blamed for escalating tensions between Iran and the United States. Trump's Middle East peace plan, unveiled in January 2020, was widely seen as biased in favor of Israel and was rejected by the Palestinians. The plan called for a disjointed Palestinian state in parts of the West Bank and Gaza, with Israel retaining control over most of Jerusalem and the Jordan Valley. The Palestinians have refused to engage with the Trump administration since the US embassy move, arguing that the United States can no longer be an honest broker in the peace process. Section 9. Checkmate or stalemate, the uncertain future of Netanyahu's gambit. As Netanyahu surveys the Middle Eastern chessboard, he is faced with a complex and ever-changing landscape. His strategy of destabilizing neighboring states to weaken Hamas and Hezbollah has had mixed results. While some countries, such as Libya and Yemen, have been plunged into chaos, others, such as Iran, have proven more resilient. Netanyahu's efforts to forge closer ties with the Arab world have also been met with both progress and setbacks. The normalization agreements with the UAE and Bahrain are significant breakthroughs, but Saudi Arabia, the ultimate prize, remains elusive. The Palestinian issue continues to cast a long shadow over the region, and the prospects for a lasting peace remain dim. Netanyahu's legacy as a statesman will likely be debated for decades to come. His supporters will point to his successes in strengthening Israel's military and intelligence capabilities, as well as his efforts to forge alliances with Arab states. His detractors will argue that his policies have made the region more unstable and have pushed a two-state solution further out of reach. Only time will tell whether Netanyahu's grand strategy in the Middle East will ultimately lead to checkmate or stalemate.